the Exelon bailout legislation that was lobbyist palooza in terms of the distribution of contracts to move that through the General Assembly. And it moved through the General Assembly with overwhelming bipartisan support and the signature of then GOP Governor Bruce Rauner. Cannot leave that out. Lost in this. What's the underlying issue that led to the ComEd investigation? The Combine. The Combine moving a bailout of a multi-billion-dollar energy company with your money. That's the underlying issue. And then also the property tax records that have been requested by the U.S. Attorney's Office from the Cook County Assessor's Office, including but not limited to Governor Jelly Belly's curious property tax relief as a result of pulling the toilets out of his multi-million-dollar mansion. And so, you need to keep this in mind when you hear, and I'm talking about Republican candidates now, especially Democrat candidates, obviously, calling for Madigan's resignation from the governor on down. What a joke. What a joke. Every single one of them in bed with him for the entirety of their political existence. Okay.
And some of them wouldn't have a political existence if it wasn't for Madigan.
Correct. But also many of, if not most of what's left, the remnants of the wreckage of the Republican Party in the same exact position as, second-tier facilitators of Combine politics, with the Exelon bailout legislation being a prime example of it. So I put this question to John Cass and to everybody. You think Madigan going that will usher in some era of reform and Illinois Renaissance? Really? Well, from where or from who will that come? I will tell you, you had a chance, we had a chance as a state, as a Republican Party, to turn the page and usher in a decidedly different political culture, starting within the GOP and then hopefully radiating out when Jeanne Ives took on Bruce Rauner in the Republican primary for governor in the last cycle.
Close to winning.
Mm-hmm. And in the infinite wisdom, those same people that are wringing their hands about Mike Madigan now, he's got to go. I'm against Madigan. The courage to behold.
Well, liberals say that, too, all the time. Like, if only we can get Madigan out. Well, what are you going to do?
So inspiring. They were antagonists of Jeanne Ives in that primary, those same people. They don't want to change anything. They want to posture and buffalo you yet again so they keep their stupid titles and more importantly, their lines of income from the way things are in Springfield with, GOP spokespeople like Pat Brady, who's just a hack lobbyist for anybody who will pay him anything.
He's in on the scam, too. They all are.
Examples abound. So here again, for some reason or other, and Jeanne Ives has decided to give it another shot in the western suburbs. Ideally, it would be more hospitable than the statewide electorate where you have to deal with Cook County. But maybe not with where Illinois is trending because of the lack of anything resembling opposition. In point of fact, the opposition is to anybody who would provide opposition. You get what I'm saying? It's all together. The clerisy is all together. And anybody who sticks their head up to provide opposition in terms of a new direction, something reform governors in our surrounding states have done over the last couple of decades that we have never even tried here, well, they get pounded down by both parties. There's an example. And again, you just have to look at people's records, what they did when it counted. That's always the most telling, isn't it? What they did when it counted and when it wasn't easy to do what they did. So let's get a little history on the underlying ComEd legislation that people are just referencing without explaining because the Chicago Press Corps is part of that Combine. And so is the Springfield Press Corps. Pleased to be joined again by Jeanne Ives, former state representative in the Western Burbs, now congressional candidate in Illinois 6, running against Sean Casten for that seat. Jeanne, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Dan and Amy.
So, give us the story of the Exelon bailout bill that occurred during your time in Springfield and what you did to oppose it and how that went.
Well, first of all, this is a bill that was worked for well over a year before its final passage in the House on December 1st and then signed by Bruce Rauner on December 6th. So they started working this in 2015. And, they came in, they had, 3 lobbyists in my office, not a one-on-one. They hired extra lobbyists to try and get this bill through. It got stalled in spring because, we didn't have a budget at that point or anything. And by the way, when we passed it in 2016, in December, we still didn't have a budget. So part of the reason Bruce Rauner signed this is he felt like he had to get something done, and what he got done was just a terrible bill. Anyway, the lobbyists for Exelon admitted to me that they were getting their lunch eaten by having to accept wind and solar credits coming onto the market, and so they couldn't compete. That's only half the story. Gas was also hurting them as well. But I kept asking them, I don't understand why you need a huge bailout when you made $2.2 billion a year before in profit. You're the largest nuclear company in the U.S., and you're telling the ratepayers in the state of Illinois that you need $2.4 billion in the bailout? I don't buy any of it. And so things continued on, and people things got negotiated over. But it's very obvious now that they extracted all sorts of agreements from Madigan to just get this bill passed, because it barely passed. And they had to change the total number of votes required from 71, which was post-session time, to 60 votes, and change the enactment date to July 1st of the next year, just to get it passed. And in the meantime, the morning of the bill, of the day that the bill was passed, you had amendments 8, 9, and 10 come on, negotiations. In caucus the morning of the bill's passage, we asked the governor's staff, is the governor going to sign this? They still couldn't give us a straight answer on whether or not he was going to sign it. So up until the end, there was back and forth going on, and that's when you know it's really a dirty deal. And they loaded this up with all sorts of pork and lard and really bad provisions, and people just sat there, and at the end of the day, they gave these people a bailout.
Yeah,
a huge bailout.
But importantly, didn't House Republican leadership put the necessary Republicans on it to get agreement with the Democrats to move it?
That's exactly what happened. And so if you were one of the reps that maybe represented Clinton nuclear plant, for example, you're voting for this bill. But really, Jim Durkin put all his leadership on this bill as well. And he had a few lame duck legislators, which is another thing. You had the 2016 election. Some of these people weren't going to run again. They were getting out of office, your Don Moffats and stuff like that. They voted yes for this as well. So this is how Madigan does it. Look, I know for a fact that when it came to the tax increase bill and the budget bill last year, that was a disaster for Illinoisans, the largest budget ever last year, and 20 new tax and fee increases. Basically, I know Durkin walked in the caucus and said, I need 20 votes on the gas tax increase, and I need 10 votes on the budget. And so he's making deals that aren't good for Illinoisans, and you're right, Republicans are coming alongside him and voting for this stuff. This is a terrible bill. Business was against this bill. Even the AARP was against this bill, knowing it would raise their rates.
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to get to, too, is, by the way, the consequences for those underwriting the bailout, meaning Illinois families and businesses, was rate hikes.
Yes, and it was also an agreement that ComEd could put in, quote-unquote, energy efficiencies and get a 9.5% return on everything that they did with energy efficiencies. Well, that's including, giving people free light bulbs, and they're making a 10% buck on that every time. It just didn't make sense, none of it. It included 2,000 jobs on the south side to teach people how to do solar installation. So, the Black Caucus got their carve-outs as well.
Sure, Green New Deal stuff, great.
And then with ComEd now, they have to pay, a $200 million fine? And are they going to really work with prosecutors? Do you think they'll be, in good faith work with them for the next 3 years to try and maybe get Madigan and others behind bars?
They better.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of confidence in John Lausch, and I hear the judge in the case is a guy named John Ness, and he's a good guy. So, hopefully this happens. But look, this is any bill like this that passes, it passes by design. And it doesn't pass just because people decide it's a good legislation. Somebody manipulated, I need to vote here, I need to vote there. Of course, Mike Zalewski, state rep, of course he voted for it. The fact that his wife is still the ICC chair is just astounding to me. I don't know how that she can survive in that role, knowing that her father-in-law is embroiled in some of this controversy here. It just seems it's nepotism at its worst. That's what happens here in the state of Illinois all the time.
Giving us some insight into other topics, because you're going door to door in the western and northwestern suburbs, and I'm not, because it cuts into my golf game. And
you also like to social distance.
Oh,
so
truly,
very important for you.
6 miles, not 6 yards, or 6 feet. So what are people saying about in the suburbs about what's going on in Chicago, what's going on in major cities around the country, the sort of violence and mayhem like we saw over the weekend? Do you see, moderates, maybe even some Democrats that don't like Trump expressing concern, if not real opposition, consideration to do something they're not likely to otherwise do, vote Republican because of the violence that we're witnessing?
I have not seen that so much door to door. I do notice it digitally online, where you do get comments, people saying, look, I wasn't going to vote for you, but honestly, I can't handle what's going on here. And so they will. And I find that a little bit shocking, quite frankly, but I think that people in the suburbs are used to being safe in the suburbs, and they don't understand that safety came because Republicans enforce the rule of law. That's why you're safe in the suburbs, because we don't have a Kim Fox. We don't have a revolving door of gun offenders getting out on recognizance bonds. We actually keep them in jail and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. So I think that they're numb to it to some degree, because they just figure they're in the safe suburbs and it's not affecting them.
Yeah, but during the riots,
it's strange as all get up.
Yeah, but during the riots, you had some civil unrest there in Naperville.
We
and
did.
I saw Hinsdale all boarded up for no reason, but they were still boarded up.
They didn't get to Fuller's, did they?
No.
Right.
I want those divorcees in Hinsdale. I want them to have somewhere to go. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeannie. Yeah.
No, it's just appalling. And then you do have people pandering here to Black Lives Matter, which is just a Marxist group. I don't understand it at all. Yeah, I can't believe good people that have their signs in their yards. It's just astounding. But I don't know. I think that they're numb to it. They're all kind of a little bit woke, and they just figure it's not going to happen in their backyard. Well, yes, it can. And by the way, the reason you have high taxes is you pay a huge corruption tax. On that alone, you need to turn out every single Democrat. There's such self-dealers, including the man I'm running against, Congressman Caston. He's out there self-dealing on green energy subsidies and renewables. He was a federal registered lobbyist, and in 2009, he wreaked $8 million in subsidies for his own personal company. He's reintroduced those same subsidies in the wake of this crisis to try and get something going again. He's just very much a self-dealer in the same area.
Well, and just on the topic of violence, too, I'll tell you what, when you see something like what happened in Peoria, where 13 people were shot, thankfully none fatally, at least of last report yesterday, in a big fight. Peoria is a nice community, mid-sized community. It can happen in Peoria. It can happen in Aurora. It can happen in Naperville. It can happen in a lot of places where, again, as you say, you have lawlessness that goes unresponded to. And so, a bit of a wake-up call for the woke.
It should be. It absolutely should be. It just hasn't happened necessarily in their own backyard. And they just, they're... I think the way that we win, really, and I think that the biggest thing here is that I think the economics are going to really turn the tide here. People are tired of the high taxes. People are worried about their jobs. They want affordable health care. None of those things are going answered. The lawlessness is a concern for sure. They just don't see it in their backyard, so they don't think it's ever coming here, and it can. Absolutely will come to the suburbs if you vote in the wrong people.
And how do you campaign during a pandemic?
We've got a very large digital online presence. We're dropping literature at doors, and we are starting to knock beginning this weekend. So we're not afraid to do that. And we think if you stand 6 feet apart and you can have a conversation with folks, you can win their votes.
Do you think that those in the Western Burbs who installed Sean Casten in a seat held by Henry Hyde and Peter Roskam over the last 40 years, do you think they understand how far left he is? We've documented a couple of instances on this show, but I mean, he's somebody who's basically in lockstep. Forget Pelosi; he's basically in lockstep with AOC and Omar and
he wants to be
Presley
one of the ladies.
and Tlaib. I mean, he really is.
Well, truthfully, we've analyzed his votes, and you'll see it coming out here shortly. But he has a more progressive voting record than AOC, than Ilhan Omar and Tlaib. A more progressive voting record. He has a more partisan voting record than the Chicago Democrats that are in Congress with him. He is a far left progressive. He wants higher taxes. He wants to completely control the energy sector, which Illinois is an energy exporter. He would destroy everything about that under his plan. He put forth a $16 trillion climate change program that's not going to change the climate at all. It's just going to hand out subsidies to favored corporations, including the ones that he's invested in himself. And he's a hypocrite on this. He's invested in a biomass company that gives off 1.5 times the amount of CO2 that coal does, if you believe that CO2 is that big of an issue. It's not a pollutant, by the way. It's a trace element necessary for life. But that's a whole other argument that these woke people out here don't want to understand.
And with respect to the violence and some of Trump's pronouncements about interceding if local authorities give in to the violence and the vandals, what has Sean Casten said about any of that? The defund the police movement in his party, in his movement.
Yeah, no, he's been completely silent on the issue. When Best Buy was broken into in his own backyard, Downers Grove, no comment from Sean Casten, nothing at all.
Gosh.
And he is just like all the rest of the Democrats. He refused to condemn the defund the police movement when he had the opportunity in Congress. He refused to condemn it.
That's
so
interesting.
He's not saying anything.
Yeah, well, which says a lot, and it should say a lot to all of those suburban residents concerned about their safety and the vitality of their local law enforcement that provides for much of that safety. She is Jeanne Ives. She's a former member of the Illinois House, former state rep, now congressional candidate running in Illinois 6th in the western and northwestern burbs against Sean Casten. Jeanne, people want to get more information about your campaign. They go where?
JeannieForCongress.com. Sign up to volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
I'm Frank Vance, co-owner of Egan Vance Insurance Agency on Chicago's Northwest Side and a customer of Signature Bank. In my line of work, we pride ourselves on being there for our clients when they need it the most, and we recognize when someone does the same for us. As Egan Vance was expanding, we wanted to buy a much sought-after building in the neighborhood. We couldn't waste any time. I called Signature Bank, and that was all it took. I didn't have to talk to multiple people and